from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
We are pleased to introduce a two-week series to all of you, our viewers, that is titled, How Are Schools and Colleges Faring in the Workplace? Recently at North Idaho College we had an evening that we called the Round Table on this particular issue. We had people from the business community, from colleges and universities to discuss this very interesting topic. Some of those people are returning to discuss this issue on the next 2 weeks, and on today's program it's a very special privilege to welcome to our program Dr. Jerry Gee, who is the Dean of Instruction at North Idaho College. Our guest is a graduate from Kansas State University holding a PhD in curriculum and instruction. After receiving his degrees, he has worked on a number of different situations in education. One of those was at Dodge City Community College, where he both taught and was an administrator. And we were fortunate to have him to come to North Idaho College a few years ago to become our Dean of Instruction, where he serves now. Dr. Gee, welcome to the program. You did an outstanding job on the Round Table, and thank you for taking time from busy schedule to be with us to discuss this topic today.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
And as always, I'm so pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all is Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho. And next to her is Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And we shall invite Janelle Burke to commence today's questioning of our guest.
Dr. Gee, it's great fun to have you here and talk about this subject, which is so interesting and also which a great number of people have a curiosity about. Can you help us to understand some of the distinctions between the types of preparation that we have? In other words, there's a basic, general, fundamental preparation that every student probably gets, and then some more specific preparations that people who perhaps are going into management might obtain, and then there are also job trainings that are very specific to the kind of job the person's going to be doing. Can you help us draw some general distinctions there in the kinds of preparations for each?
Yes. When you start talking about higher education and also the secondary education, the high school education and preparation for whatever it is a student may be doing out of high school, some extremely difficult choices need to be made. And most of us, truthfully, are not willing to make some of those choices. Right now in the state of Idaho, as freshmen in high school, I think probably about 90% of the students would respond that they're going to receive a bachelor's degree as a minimum of their higher education level, where in actuality about 20% of those students will succeed in that endeavor. What they do in high school then is going to directly relate to what they do on the post-secondary level, higher education level. I'm not an advocate of channeling students. I'm a very strong advocate that every student ought to be able to have the opportunity to pursue the educational level that they deem appropriate for that individual. But in reality, many times students don't succeed at the level that perhaps they aspire initially. Most of our higher education programs then have got the bachelor degree level, but also then the applied tech or the training side, if you will, which many times is a 1 or 2 year program designed to allow the students to enter the workforce quite quickly. I saw an interesting piece of data by Mike Rush, the Executive Director for Vocational Education, this weekend, where he was showing the earning potential of bachelor degreed individuals versus 2 year certificate or associate degree individuals. And truthfully, at this point in time, the earning potential is not that drastically different between those two types of programs. And that's quite a change. But I think some of our students need to be more cognizant of some of the educational opportunities they've got. Of course, beyond that, then, once students get into the workforce, I'm not sure a lot of our people have given thought to this. The 18-year-old that graduates from high school today will be able to collect Social Security at the age of 70. Now, I'm not real bright in math, But something tells me that's approximately 52 years that they're going to be in that workforce. And to evaluate the magnitude of changes that are going to take place in their careers during that time period, the third aspect probably will be the most busy, and that is the training and retraining and going back to school to not only succeed in the career they have today, but prepare themselves for the new careers that are going to be coming down the pike. And that's going to be a tough one.
Steve Sheen.
Jerry, one of the things we're focusing on today is to what extent education is doing a good job of preparing people to go into the workforce. And I'm going to turn that around a little bit and ask you whether, from your perspective, employers are doing a good job of telling educators what it is they need in future employees.
Steve, that's a good question, and I think that's a neat way to approach it. I think people in industry think they are. I think they are trying to convey as well as they possibly can to educational entities what it is they deem appropriate. But in actuality, based upon the industry, there are only about 5 or 6 common components or competencies that we can find that are going to be unilateral across all professions. And beyond that, then, they become somewhat specific. And they're things that we've been talking about for years and continue to talk about, and they're the computation skills, the communication skills, the critical thinking skills, the common sense, the being able to work with others, and then there's 1 or 2 others that fall in. And those are the only things that I've seen over time that are common to virtually any profession someone goes into. Now you start getting more specific, and when we get to that level, I'm not sure industry does do a good job in communicating. I think, yeah, they think they do, but in actuality, I'm not sure that's true.
Let me ask you to react to this then, and it's a follow-up. I was at a conference not too many years ago in Portland, I believe, and there was an industry panel there talking to educators, and I asked them whether, in their view, they thought they were and I don't think this was intentional, but whether they were being honest, because they talk about those skills that you just listed, and I think that's a great foundation for anyone,
Absolutely.
frankly. But they say those are the things we want to see, and if we had people with those skills, we'll hire them and be delighted. And yet, if you look at the want ads in the newspapers, you won't see jobs advertised for people with those skills. They seem to want and hire different things, people with more specific training and with job experience. How do you respond to that? Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, I do. When you start talking about the skills we just addressed, those are probably not going to be entry-level skills in a number of professions. Mm-hmm. But as a person continues within that profession, those skills are going to be needed for them to progress through the system and to make the advancements that they hope their employees will because of the investment they've made in them. Yeah, there are some differences there, and I'm not sure how, as educators or as higher education institutions, we really address those differences other than differentiating between the employers. What are your entry-level skills? Your absolutely bare bone, what do you need for this person to start in this profession? Versus what are the ideals as they move through the system? And I think we've got to differentiate between the two.
And if you'll let me follow up one more time, because I think it's so important to young people, to parents who are trying to advise their kids in school. Those 5 skills, though, and I know students in college, and sometimes significantly through their college career struggle with this question of what do I want to do? What's my major going to be? Is it good advice to them to say, ground yourself in those 5 skills, and then you're prepared to move in almost any direction you want?
You know, Steve, Saturday I had a chance to address a group of high school kids, and that was basically my message to them, regardless of whether they're looking for a 4-year degree or whether they're looking at a 1 or 2-year certificate. If they have the basic skills, they're going to be in a position to make what I call professional transitions. And in that 52-year time period that they've got to work, I'm afraid many of them are going to have to make some very significant professional transitions in their lives. And the skills that are common to all professions, I think, are the ones that are going to allow those students that have them mm-hmm. and do a good job with them, they're going to make those transitions quite easily. The student that doesn't and struggles, it's going to be more difficult.
Thank you.
Earlier today, before we did this program, I had the privilege, thanks to you, Dr. G, to be involved in an interview for a position that we are looking at for someone at a university. I'm on the search committee.
Sure.
And the candidate was extremely impressive about what you're talking about, the revolution going on in technology and education and in the business world. And his position was that universities, colleges are going to have to undergo tremendous change, and that's sometimes very challenging to education. We get criticized sometimes in the business community for this. And I give you that background to ask these series of questions, and you're deeply involved in this, and that's why we're taking this opportunity to do so. I heard a statistic during our roundtable that approximately 25% of all people going into higher education will be needed in the future with baccalaureate and higher degrees, and that 75% will not need that particular track, but will need a lot of training in technology. Do you agree with this? And if so, what does that mean as a challenge to higher education as we move into the 21st century?
You know, Tony, I'm not sure how accurate my crystal ball is, but I probably today would have to agree with that. I think back in the last 15 years, when I first started working on computers, and look at the transitions that have taken place. You know, I was joking with my daughter the other day. When she was born 18 years ago, there wasn't a CD. You know, it didn't exist. I personally, 18 years ago, had not turned on a computer, let alone tried to run one. But yet this generation has grown up with this technology, and all I can see is that it's just going to try, or going to increase significantly. How is education going to address that need?
Does that mean a change in curriculum, staff, and training? And
I think it's across the total spectrum. The thing that we've got to do is we've got to remain or become more flexible. We've got to be in a situation where when needs arise, that we can address them. We've got to be very tolerant of people that are in and out of our institutions. We can't bank on the student that is here, and we can bank on them being here 4 years or 2 years. The vast majority of them, I think, are going to be coming in and out of our doors, and over an extremely long period of time. And we've got to be willing to address that need and meet that need.
This interviewee said today that he's agreeing with you, and hope you and he can have some dialogue.
I hope so too.
That in that 52 years that you're talking about, he was indicating too that people are going to be, it's a revolving door. They're in and out. They come
Sure.
and get certain training, they leave, and then there's a change in that company, and then they're back in college. And so, how do we even know what the needs are going to be with this revolving door?
We don't. And for us to sit here and try and second guess what they're going to be, I think is impossible. I think it's what we've got to do is we've got to be in a situation that as the needs arise, and as industry demands things of us, that we're in a position to seriously evaluate what we're doing, perhaps let some things go, retool just as industry has, and start addressing those needs, knowing full well that they may not continue for an extended period of time. I was asked about a teaching position today. It may be one of the first times in my life that I recommend a teaching position in a specific discipline not be a long-term contract. But I may look at it for a 2-year contract saying, is the demand still going to be here for this specialty? If it is, absolutely we'll continue. If it's not, is there a different direction that we need to go?
If the panel will permit me, I'll do one more question and I'll go back to them with their fine questions. The liberal arts is coming out in me, the political science, and my biases.
Absolutely, and they should.
Thank you very much for permitting me to have that. I'm very concerned about the individual in addition to their workplace and their livelihood there, which is important, but I'm very interested in their citizenship. Democracy depends upon informed citizenry. So as I look at these numbers and I see more and more moving towards the technology training, do we not have to convince business and others to incorporate in that part of the curriculum of teaching good citizenship, which is oftentimes in a different kind of curriculum than the technical training? And can we financially do that, and will the marketplace permit it? Otherwise, I'm afraid what might happen to the democracy.
You know, Tony, I think it may be addressed just a little bit differently. And that is, I think that employers may lead that charge as another skill that they see as extremely important and viable for their employees. The things that we learn through the process of political science, citizenship, etc., the obligations as citizens to this country that each one of us should take seriously and fulfill. I think industry, if they start seeing a real deficit in that area for their employees, they're going to demand that it happen. It's good for business, and it's good for their people, and it's good for our country. And I really think that if we see it taper off to where the spectrum is really skewed, I think we'll see it correct itself, but it won't be educators leading the charge. It'll be the businesses leading that charge.
It's important to private enterprise that democracy be preserved.
Absolutely. They've got to have it.
Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. Janelle Burt.
I'm interested in returning a bit to the specifics and some of the new hot areas that you see where there's lots of demand, or maybe something that's just a little bit different that's been incorporated into the curriculum at, say, for example, a college such as North Idaho College, which has a number of AA degree programs. What are some of these areas that you can think of that might be interesting to our viewing audience?
Probably the largest growth industry that we're experiencing is in the health sciences. The health field is it's wide open.
And what kinds of things are in that field?
Well, we have started here. Last year we started a physical therapist assistant program that it looks like is going to be accredited and be a very, very successful program for us. A pharmacy technician program, a mental health assistance program, of course your typical licensed practical nurse. Our ADN, registered nurse program, is still doing extremely well. That area is, for some reason, and I think it's due to an aging population in part, is a very rapidly growing area.
Do you kind of assess the needs and
Absolutely.
then you add the programs?
Absolutely. We don't add a program on this campus until we do a detailed needs assessment to make sure that there is a need in the area, and that our students, once we have taken them through the training program or they've completed their educational experience in NIC, they've got a good shot of being placed. In our applied tech programs this last year, we placed a little over 80% of all of them in fields that they had trained for, which is pretty good.
And how do students know about all of these various kinds of programs? How do people find out about them?
Sometimes it's the best kept secret. We make the assumption that folks, through their high school counselors, through publications that we put out, through friends and neighbors, are very aware of the total offerings, not only at this institution, but across the state and region. In actuality, that may not be the case. And I'm really not sure how you do an excellent job in conveying all of the opportunities to everyone, other than if folks have got questions, not only with North Idaho College, but any of the educational institutions, a quick phone call will get a lot of answers. It really will.
Steve Sheen.
If I may, Jerry, I'm going to draw on a couple of your previous answers and some of Tony and Janelle's questions and maybe create something a little bit different. You talked about the fact that we can expect students to drop in and out of school, that they're going to need retraining, that perhaps the old notion that a bachelor's degree ought to be achieved in 4 years is outmoded. Tony touched on the topic of what we call liberal arts education and the need for that in society today. And of course, employers have all these specific requirements that they want to see employees meet. Are we developing a curriculum that's so broad that it's unrealistic to expect our students to master it?
I don't think so, Steve. I think we're developing a curriculum that becomes much more specialized for the student once they have a concept of what direction they want to go. The general education component, the liberal arts component, if you will, of the bachelor's degree, I think is going to remain very constant. I think if we could make some changes in it, the changes would be simply that we take a look at perhaps expanding the application of some of those courses. A good blend of theory and application, I think, is something that will probably be a transition that we'll see take place. And I know that in Tony's class he does do quite a bit of application work, and that's great. Within the other areas, I think that the bulk of them will be competency-based courses. I think the students will go into the course knowing what they should learn and will be tested upon the skills that they do achieve. As they come in and out, I think we can make some assumptions that probably will hold true. And that is, people are going to find as they go through their lives, they may have the technical skills they need, but they're missing some of the other things that make life worthwhile, such as arts, the music, the political science, the literature, and the list goes on. And I think you're going to see students not only coming back for the things that are going to help them in the job, but that personal enrichment as well. And I think we're going to see a lot of folks taking advantage of that. It may not ever lead to a degree, but yet, there's a real sense of accomplishment for these students. And I look at this group, and each one of us could name some topics right now, if I had a chance to go back to school, that I would want to study. We're not exempt from it either.
That was a great answer, Jerry, and I couldn't agree with it more. But I'm going to come at my question again from a little different angle, and Tony will love this because I think maybe it'll spur a question for him too. As an instructor, I've heard him say many times that he's under pressure to lower his standards, and he refuses to do that. As institutions, are we doing enough to insist that students master those basic skills you talked about earlier, so that they can then successfully move on to higher level applications?
Steve, I hope so. I would be disappointed if we weren't. I think there's another direction that we have to be aware of here, and that is there is a level that every student must master these basic skills, but that's not where learning ceases. Through their job, through other avenues, most people are going to improve on those skills as they go through life. At least I hope so. I know I have. I still question sometimes why I took algebra, but yet I know some of the things that algebra definitely taught me, and some of the things that I've used from it. So I'm not sure the formal education, yes, we've got to have a minimum, but we've also got to realize that beyond formal education, there are also other educational endeavors that are going to allow students to increase those skills and those minimum standards. I didn't answer your question very well.
Yeah, you did. I think you answered it very well. Thank you.
This revolving door that I'm playing on here today, I'm really enjoying this interview. You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
We got all this service to carry on with people coming in and out, and it's a larger population and limited resources. So one of the things that you're very involved in and that we're doing is everyone's not going to come and be on site at the campus, distance learning, and we don't have a lot of time left, but this particular delivery system of technology for distance learning is going to create, more options and more training and retraining of people. That, again, I hear that number that kind of I shriek from working for 52 years, even if you love your job. But what is the role of distance learning in making this all happen?
It's going to provide a lot of people some opportunities they haven't had in the past. Whether as a society we truly take advantage of those to their fullest potential, I don't know. I think individuals will. When we start talking about, in this region, uniting 9 area high schools plus 5 hospitals through compressed video and being able to do things like this live and being interacted with those students, that's a great capability.
Or the internet.
Or the internet. The Western Governors University, satellite downlinks, the list goes on and on.
Attending conferences all over the world by satellite.
Absolutely. Anna Berg programs on PBS, the opportunity for education is going to be there. Hopefully people will take advantage of it. Hopefully, as educational institutions, we can identify what their needs are. To me, that's the real key. We know what the general education needs are. We know what the needs are for many of the specific training programs we have. But I think we need to be looking much broader as to what the total educational needs are going to be for a lot of these people that we can now reach, that we haven't been able to reach in the past.
To our friends in business and labor and the community in general, as we share with them this mind-boggling doubling of knowledge just every few years now, it's voluminous. So as we get requests from different communities to serve them, and we have this mountain of information, how are we going to sift through, again, what Steve was asking about curriculum and so forth, and how do we deal with the tremendous amount of information, what we're going to choose to share?
Tony, the whole concept, and I think the only way that we can do it, is we've got to teach people how to resource it when they need it.
And find it for themselves.
And find it for themselves. And if we can teach that to where they are comfortable and know the total capabilities of where they can find information when they need it, we're going to be in great shape. It's those that don't have the resources or the ability to find that information that are going to be left behind.
Janelle, we have less than 2 minutes.
My question has to do with partnerships. Traditionally, educational institutions have been very distinct, and they've not been involved in a lot of partnerships with business. Do you see that shifting? With corporations and so forth. In other words, they've always been very independent. Yeah. Educational institutions have been independent.
I'm not sure if a lot of them will be formal partnerships, but I do think that the dialogue has got to be continual between business and industry and education. In some cases, absolutely, there'll be partnerships that form. But in order for a true partnership to be effective, all entities have got to benefit. And sometimes I think we all don't realize what the total benefits are between partnerships. Therefore, they may not be as successful as they could be. The key is going to be continual dialogue and developing an understanding of what each entity does and the contributions they make to the educational system.
On that note, Dr. Jerry G., I have to bring the program to conclusion. On behalf of the panel and the staff, it truly has been a delight to have you here. You've done an excellent job, informative, and I think we've really sparked our viewers to pursue this further. And on the topic that we've dealt with today, how are schools and colleges faring in the workplace? And the good news is that we have 2 other guests that'll be here next week with us to add to what you said. But I've been doing this program a long time, and I have really enjoyed today's program, and I know the panel joins me in saying that. Thank you, Dr. Jerry G., the Dean of Instruction at North Idaho College. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when, as I've indicated, we're going to do part 2 of how are schools and colleges faring in the workplace. And I hope you'll join us at that time and continue this discussion and what we are dealing with. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station. From the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist, Tony Stewart.
We're most pleased to welcome you to our second week of How Are Schools and Colleges Faring in the Workplace. For our viewers who were with us last week, you will know that we dealt with part 1, and this week we're dealing with part 2. We're very fortunate to have 2 guests who are highly qualified to discuss this important subject. I first of all welcome to the program Dr. Terry Armstrong, who is Emeritus Faculty at the University of Idaho Department of Education, or College of Education, and I've known Dr. Armstrong for a long time. It's a pleasure to have him with us. He holds a BS degree from Southern Mississippi University, an MNS from the University of Idaho, and a Doctorate of Education from the University of Idaho in the School of Education. He has held a number of positions over the years at that university, including assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor. He also had a number of administrative responsibilities, including serving as executive assistant to the president from 1978 to 1989. He has been a major force at the University of Idaho over the years, and Dr. Armstrong, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you.
I'm equally pleased to have Mr. Jerry Jaeger, who is the president of Hagedon Hospitality. As president of that corporation and co-owner, he has been a leader in the hospitality industry for now over 30 years. The company owns and operates a number of award-winning facilities across the Pacific Northwest, and they're best known for their, I would say, centerpiece, which is the Coeur d'Alene Resort here in Coeur d'Alene, and it has been recognized as one of the top 10 resorts in the United States. He is a graduate of the Washington State University, and he has received numerous awards for his work in the hospitality industry, and known Jerry a long time, and it's a pleasure, too, to welcome you to our program, and thank you for coming.
Good to be here.
And as always, I'm very pleased to have our two regular panelists. First of all, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall invite Janelle Burke to commence today's questioning with our guests.
My first question, Jerry, is for you, but Terry, if you will join in if you think that there's something you would wish to add. I'll ask the same question that I asked last week as we began the program with regard to Jerry G., who was here from the North Idaho College faculty. In the field of work, the workplace, and in preparation for working outside in the field of the industry, there are a number of different ways that people are prepared. For example, there are the general underlying basic courses that people need. There are more specifics that are needed. In your field of hospitality, you have people that go from the very lowest service-oriented positions up to the very highest rung in your corporation. What are the different kinds of preparations that an industry expects?
First of all, I'd reverse the pyramid you just described, because I think at the very highest part of our hospitality industry, the people that are on our front line are the most important and, in my mind, the most skilled, and they're the ones that really make a company like ours work. But there's all kinds of different opportunities. North Idaho College here has a very good culinary arts program that is gaining in momentum. Down at Washington State University, where I went to school, we have a very good nationally known hotel and restaurant school for management. There's a number throughout the country, and there's all different kinds of levels. Ours is really not a very high-tech industry. As you infer in your question, it's more of a people person type of industry, but it's an industry that has a lot of opportunities and is very exciting, one that I enjoy very much.
Terry, would you add to that the various kinds of levels? I'm assuming that there are some basics that every student who comes out of education should have as they go into the workplace.
Right. I want to recognize the basic skills that are needed for all individuals in our society. Jerry, relies on a learned clientele. It's just not the persons who work for him. He wants to have bright, able people come to visit the Coeur d'Alene Resort. So I would think that for the first 4 or 5 years of public education, mastery of a good, common, basic core of experience is important for everybody. Math, language arts, social sciences, learning to get along with people, all of those things are basic. Then we gradually begin to move toward more specialization. There's a vocational track often, there's a business preparation track, and there may be a college preparation track that some students find themselves in. That's typically the way we do it in the state of Idaho. You know, I talked to a number of people before our panel discussion, because I certainly don't consider myself an expert in this area at all, but a number of people I spoke with, and I talked to teachers, I talked to students, I talked to administrators, business people, and it seemed that one common area that was really important for any type of business or industry was good communication skills, both written and verbal, in an area that is really important. If someone can't express themselves, no matter how smart or how good their ideas are, if they can't get those ideas across, they're going to have difficulty.
I'm glad you closed with a communication comment, because I want to pursue that in a little bit different way. Our topic today is how well is education meeting the needs of business and industry. And that's got to start, I would think, with communication between those two entities. And I'm just going to throw it open to both of you to discuss how well business and education are communicating about what business needs and what education can provide?
I think the communication can be better. I don't think it's terrible. Certainly, I think our business community and our whole society, I think our number one priority is supporting education. I just believe that. As a company, we've always believed that and supported our educational systems, and we'll continue to do that. I get worried a little bit that some of our facilities in Idaho are not supported as much as they should be through bond issues, whether we should have a 2/3 supermajority or 60% majority. I would tend toward the 60%. I heard candidate Kempthorne for governor talked about his announcement for governor. He talked about that children make up 25% of our Idaho population, but 100% of our future. And so I think the communications between our educational system and our businesses is very important. But I don't think you can grade the educational system all by itself. I don't think you can say the teachers in schools get a B, C, A. I think you have to say that the teachers in schools, the parents, and the support that we as a society give to our education. That's what the grade should be based on, all of that, because it's not just the teacher's responsibility.
Terry, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, over the years, colleges and universities have relied extensively on collaboration with business industry. We've always had advisory groups. Every college within a university has an advisory group made of the best and brightest persons that they can find to aid in developing the curriculum, making adjustments to the curriculum, even in the hiring process, helping recommend individuals for positions. Only recently have we seen public schools needing to form those kinds of collaborations. And here in Idaho, where we find business industry more scarce than in other places, it's hard. We often find collaborations with Forest Service, with Bureau of Land Management, Soil Conservation Service. Many communities don't have an enterprise that we would look at as a corporation or a big business or an industry that has multifacets like maybe Coeur d'Alene hospitality. But clearly we know the need for that is absolutely clear right now. We must come together. And I join Jerry in saying it's a parent-teacher community partnership. It has to be. It just has to be. In fact, it may include higher education as well in that partnership.
Thank you.
Something that we were talking about earlier on the program last week, and I've also been involved in an interview process for hiring of a person that brought this to my attention, and that is, one, people are going to work longer than they have in the past. They're going to raise the level of retirement for Social Security now maybe to 70 in the future. And secondly, jobs change drastically over time, and new jobs are being created. It's a rather involved question, but I heard one statistic that 20% of all jobs that will exist in the year 2010 don't exist today. This is overwhelming to educational institutions. And so my question to both of you, and Terry, I'll start with you, is we don't know what those jobs are at this point. And secondly, we don't know all the training that we'll need for those, what I call the revolving door in and out of education so much. What kind of partnership can we have between business industry and education with so many unknowns?
It's a very good question. New book out. A person by the name of Tapscott is talking about a new cohort group. It's no longer the boomers, but it's the boomers' children now. A group of youngsters now who, as Jerry suggests, are going to be extremely able in communicating with one another. They have to. In fact, right now, those kids are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, clear on through 13, 14 years of age. It's a large cohort group. It's perhaps 30% of the entire population who will be experiencing this change in position. But Jerry, where they are amazing is that they are computer literate almost at age 4. You wait till those grandchildren of yours become 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we're envisioning a communication that is not just face-to-face, the kinds of communication that you know is so important in the hospitality business, or me in the teaching business, but it's going to be forming huge networks that are going to make much of what many of us do, I'm afraid, obsolete. But the central core of that is going to be a technological enterprise that is almost beyond comprehension, I believe. We need to read this Tapscott's book that talks about the digital generation that's going to be digitized from birth virtually.
Hey, Jerry, in your business, it don't seem like you could be at your age in the business that long. You're still young. But you've seen a lot of changes even in technology, that your employees have to be computer literate. You know, you're doing everything through the computer restoration and with your conventions and so forth. There's a lot of things that involve some technology. And so how do you see this, and again, in relation to education? And in your business, the hospitality, is it going to also go through some revolutionary changes?
Oh, I think so. You know, even though we're not a, quote, high-tech business, there's still a lot of technology involved, not just at the registration and front desk areas, right down to the locks that open hotel rooms now are all computerized. And I think sometimes we can spend too much time memorizing formulas, memorizing information, as opposed to learning how to be creative in our thinking. And I think that our education system here is pretty doggone good at that. I know that there was a study of the United States and a bunch of foreign countries not too long ago, and we were 17th or 18th. Japan was second or third, and some of the Scandinavian countries, a lot of them were way above us. But the Minister of Education in Japan said, we want our education to be more like the American one. They were testing for memory and do you know the answer to these 4 questions, as opposed to being able to be creative problem solvers. And I think that's what we need to be pointing toward. I'm sure you're right that there'll be all kinds of new jobs and opportunities, and many that we have today won't exist. And so,
what a good point you're making. We can even critique the test. Sometimes we might be given the wrong test as we rank countries, because what are we really wanting? And I'll go back to Terry as an educator, and Steve had alluded to this too. What do we want the education profile to look like in the near future?
Big issue, big question, huge question. We're coming to understand, Jerry said it very well, it's not how smart we are, but it's how we're smart. People have different facets to their intellect, each of which contributes to the betterment of society as a whole. Jerry doesn't want to have exclusively a bunch of mathematicians working for him. He needs people with a number of skills. He needs people that have body kinesthetic smarts to operate that golf course. He needs to have people with artistic sensitivities to decorate that place. He needs musical competence, helping out in ways that entertain people. So it's not just going to be verbal and numerical smarts that we have traditionally measured, I think, to make this a successful society. We have to again, ensure that everyone has a basic education to the extent they can, but all of these facets of the intellect are going to have to be nurtured and promoted in the future, in my judgment.
Body kinesthetics?
We call it BK.
Right now I need someone to spell
we
that.
We talk about BK kids. BK, body kids, there are people that have brilliance in the way they operate their body. Think of Michael Jordan as a person who doesn't think about what he does on the court, but it is beautiful. He's a genius. He's a natural genius there. Tiger Woods is another natural genius. That is another kind of intelligence. And those people are as prized in our society as someone who knows about Herman Melville. I would think.
He's talking about your golf, Steve.
The Herman Melville part.
Oh, no.
Janelle Burke.
Sometimes there's a perception in the public eye that education is not really preparing people very well. And there's a lot of criticism of public education as well as private too. But there's a lot of criticism of education that it's really not preparing people very well for the skills they have to have. Jerry, would you respond to that? And then Terry perhaps can tell us what he thinks.
Mm-hmm. As I told you, I talked to a number of people. And I did get a number of different reactions and thoughts. I got grades from poor grades up to very good grades. And my own personal grade, at least in my area of where I live here in the Coeur d'Alene area, is pretty doggone good. I think as a community we emphasize education pretty well, and I give our education system a good grade. This is the most recent Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce membership report, and there's 24 pages of editorial type copy, and then there's a list of members. But of the 24 pages, 7 talk about how important education is to us as a community, and I think we cannot lose sight of that. Particularly as a business community, we have to be supportive. I I did one interesting number. I think it's fairly accurate. It costs about $4,700 a year to teach a child in the Coeur d'Alene School District, and it costs about $38,000 a year to support a person in prison. So I think we're a lot better off to support the educational program.
And good schools do attract good businesses. Is that what you're saying? That's sort of a bottom line.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what the Coeur d'Alene Chamber is saying. And I think I'd further say, Janelle, you get what you pay for. The Moscow School District in Idaho is an excellent one. The tests and their comparisons to other districts, they do very, very well. And they have the third and second highest salary scales. They attract the best teachers. And I'm sure the university is a big factor of that, but you get what you pay for. And I think that's the same in education.
Well, I'll defend the schools to the end. I'm in schools virtually every week, and I can take you places. I can take places in northern Idaho that are exemplary, despite some very serious shortcomings. I feel very good. Now, when you look at society, however, I don't want to attribute all the problems of society to public schools, but we have in this country 18 million alcoholic persons. We have 20 million persons who are addicted to other things. We have 44 million persons addicted to nicotine. These are signs that the health of the country is not in good shape. In fact, if you 20% are over 20% overweight, I mean, those are all issues that are concerns that are not products of the schools necessarily. We know, for example, this will be kind of very academic, but we know, for example, that those compulsions and those addictions are genetic problems now. The long arm of the 11th chromosome is atypical. The receptor sites for a very important neurotransmitter are fewer in number in those individuals. The school needs to deal with issues like that rather than worrying always about positioning people for jobs and so forth. You understand what I'm saying? Heretofore, those have been problems that schools have assumed to be their own, but they're no longer viewed that way. These are genetic issues that teachers have to deal with every day. Your daughter knows about these kinds of things. They're very troublesome. So let's not attribute everything as problems of American education, for heaven's sake.
Steve Sheen. Jerry, to what extent does the Hagedorn Corporation deliver its own training to its employee workforce, and to what extent do you rely on traditional systems for that training?
Go back to Janelle's first excellent question. There are different areas of responsibility, and depending on what area someone might be in. For example, in our accounting department, we have a number of CPAs, which is a whole different level of training than maybe someone that's in another area. We do, in our industry, a fair amount of our own training in terms of the day-to-day job opportunities and requirements. And so I would say that is an area we work hard at, and I'm proud of the success we've had in that area. One of the things we really work hard at doing, and hopefully the three of you have observed it because you're very good customers of ours, and thank you for being so. But we try to really find people with great personalities, people that care about serving people, that have a good attitude about our industry. And then from there, if we can start with that, we've got a real leg up on the training.
But Jerry, let me ask you, because that's another intelligence. Not everyone, in your preparation, not everyone meets people gently and kindly and convivially.
Is that called EQ? EQ?
Well, there is an emotional quotient, which is a little bit different. But my point is, you would not seek out someone who can't meet people well to work for you in those front line positions.
If they're on the front line.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
And when people lament that individuals can't make change and all these horror stories you hear about that, there are people whose math aptitudes are so weak that would not be a position you would want to hire someone to do, for heaven's sake. You need to have a little acumen when you do this hiring, for heaven's sake. I don't want to hire Tiger Wood, maybe, to do my Herman Melville business. He doesn't do Herman Melville.
Not a bad golfer, though.
But he's a dandy golfer.
The reason I revisited that question with Jerry is that there's no question about a great deal of education going on in corporate America today. Sure. And some of that, not all of it certainly, but some of it is a product of some frustration with what is at least perceived as the inability of education to respond. And some of our critics would say that our systems are based on a 1,000-year-old model. Now, I, like you, happen to think we've got teachers today that are better than they've ever been, and in most cases education that's better than it's been before. But what would you say to people that allege that we're too slow to respond, that we aren't able to move quickly enough to meet the emerging training needs of business and industry?
There's going to be situations where that's true, that things are burgeoning. The knowledge base is going so fast that we are having a hard time keeping track of what happens next. On the other hand, to the extent that you have collaborations with individuals who are cutting-edge people, there should be no excuse for management not taking opportunities for sabbatical experiences. You send your people to conferences all the time to get them upgraded. Every enterprise ought to be doing the same thing. The problem in public schools is the travel budget for most agencies like, say, Sorensen Elementary School is probably less than $1,000 for the entire staff. I mean, that's no joke. So I think we're going to have to rely more and more on technology to keep ourselves informed of what's going on. And Jerry said it, the internet is absolutely, it's so important to keep abreast of everything. It's just, it's part of our lives now.
Coeur d'Alene has the chamber, I don't know if I brought it, Steve, but they have a teacher intern program that I really applaud. And I talked to the chamber this morning, and they indicated that they felt they would have between 18 and 20 teachers involved in it this summer. And it's not because there aren't more teachers that are interested. There's not enough businesses that are stepping forward. And so having heard that, we're going to step forward even more than we have, because I think that's a good way to tie
a great illustration. Teachers need to have real-world experiences. In addition to going to school each summer, teachers need to have a variety of experiences with business and industry. If we believe firmly in the free enterprise system, then teachers need to be participants in that enterprise. Teachers are competitive at school. They compete with one another, but and schools indeed compete. You know that, but competing in the business world is unique and different, and we need to have that exposure.
Well, and I don't want to belabor this question too long, but I'm not nearly as concerned about the ability of our teachers to master new content areas as I am about the ability, and this is a criticism of myself, of our administrators to change systems to allow that new knowledge to be applied in a way that business can take advantage of it. That's where I think we're often criticized for moving too slowly. And as a former administrator who's returned to the classroom, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's right now everyone's talking restructuring. Everybody knows you have to restructure. In addition to doing your daily work, you have to check your email, you have to check your voicemail, you have to do your business upgrading and all of this, plus find time to creatively and thoughtfully prepare for an altogether different approach. We've been doing that this year, thanks to the largesse of the Albertson Foundation. We hope to persuade them to award us $300,000 over the next few years to help us. Actually, it's more than that. It's probably going to be closer to $900,000 to help us with liberating some time so that we can collaborate with teachers in the field as well as with ourselves. We have to marry the teachers that are currently working. I find it very difficult to teach all day and then plan for those additional hours in the afternoon. It's hard to do that, and teachers find that hard, but we must find time and ways of doing that, clearly.
Thank you.
Steve has built a bridge for me as we're getting close to the end of the program. This all costs dollars, and this new technology and distance learning and all the things that you've been talking about. And it brought a question to my mind. In the interview I had with someone else earlier today, we talked about some corporations in this country that are creating their own colleges and universities. They think they can fit a curriculum that's best for them. We're seeing different industries, as Jerry's talked about, that have very different needs. They're very opposite. And so I was thinking along those lines that no university, no college probably can either financially or otherwise through resources satisfy all those needs. Is one of the things that we should look at different universities who specialize in different services and therefore become better at a particular area and let a different university or college carry on a different type of offerings. That I'm speaking in that arena where we're talking about with the business community. There are certain for academic pursuits, a basic core curriculum. But is that a possibility, looking at that direction?
I think it's a very real possibility. I'm interrupting Jerry, but I think it's a very real possibility. It's going on. Jerry's alma mater and our school are good examples of individuals who have come together, mutually agreed on curricular areas, on library acquisitions. We don't do hotel motel business. Mm-hmm. We don't do horses. Washington State does horses. I mean, we absolutely collaborate. We meet on the half hour, you guys meet on the hour, so we're able to do that. And likewise, institutions are going to be moving so rapidly that they will indeed have to have their own programs of educating their workers. There's no question about it. It's going to be that specified.
I think it's absolutely right on. I think it's happening and will continue to happen even more so because of not enough resources.
And then that way the resources can be spread out to serve all these different needs. And again, what we've been talking about concerning, to me, it's really interesting to know that there's so many jobs that we'll have in a few years, we don't even know what they are. And so as we do spread this out, we can also then provide some avenue for the new responsibilities for each college and university. On that note, I'm going to have to bring the program to conclusion. I think it's a very positive note that as we talked before the program, before you got here, we said you can either be very scared about all this or be very optimistic about the future. But change is here, and we're just about to move into the 21st century when we'll see a lot of that. On behalf of the panel and our staff, I want to thank Dr. Terry Armstrong and Mr. Jerry Jaeger for a very outstanding program. It's been stimulating to us, and I know that our viewers have experienced the same, and so I hope that's helpful to probably do the program so our viewers can think about where they want to go in the future, and we encourage them all to pursue other avenues of education through lifetime learning. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I would invite you to be with us again next week, and we will commence a new issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.